Um, I remember sitting at the EOC, and the people from Bay County came down with the other commissioners, and they talked about they had a long-term recovery task force, and they had a plan to try to maximize recovery. This is a financial recovery, as we all know, hitting some of us much deeper than others, but we all have impacts as a result of this. This appears right now to be the third costliest hurricane in history. And obviously, as a result of having the opportunity to look at probably a half a dozen plans, one of the things that seem to be around is a task force that's always been put together. So I thank you all for participating in this. I think it's essential for Lee County's recovery. And I think together, although we'll have many different issues that are independent of one another, we'll have many commonalities as we have already started to find those. And we'll continue to obviously identify those as things evolve in this situation. Appreciate the chair of our delegation, Jenna Persons, being here, but more importantly, just all your assistance through the madness that we've had to do up in Tallahassee. And it's been an interesting process. I had the privilege of testifying before the House and the Senate. And really what they did was called up different communities or counties. So I was there with Collier, Charlotte, Flagler, and Volusia. And we tried to paint a large picture of what things looked like as best we could. And I worked very closely and appreciate all the help Matt Caldwell gave me in identifying all the parcels that were obviously damaged and what needs to take place. There's so many aspects of this recovery that we're going to come across, but at the end of the day, this is a financial recovery. That's what this is. We as a society have bounced back from many different recoveries, from obviously the meltdown in the markets in 2007 and 8 to the pandemic we just went through, to obviously natural disasters, and this impacting Lee County more than anyone could imagine. But again, I do believe this is a financial recovery. And one that has many branches and arteries to it, whether, as we were talking on Friday with the Lieutenant Governor, the financial recovery aspect where we could advocate together is working and advocating with the SBA so our businesses and our individuals have the opportunity to maximize their recovery, or working together in advocating for this to be declared a disaster loss. For some of you don't know, pardon to bore you with the accounting terms, but disaster loss enables our citizens, our constituents, that's what we're doing this for, to enable them for their loss to take dollar for dollar a deduction on their tax return. Right now, this is considered a casualty loss. This is your, what's known as your adjusted gross income, and that would have very unfavorable treatment to any taxpayer. So when you're going through various aspects of recovery, it's important that we advocate for that, because our taxpayer is really what we need to do. We have patients at all different aspects, constituents that are all different parts of their recovery, some anemic, some barely alive, and some trying to move forward. So whatever we can do together in the recovery aspect, you go one step further and you look at DOT, and right now, amazing work by the governor. Appreciate everything that he did, building bridges as quickly as he did, allowing Sanibel the opportunity to recover, Pine Island to recover. But one of the things that we quickly learned is that the new bridges have a cost share and a match that's required. A 20% match right now that's estimated to be almost $70 million, and the match needs to come from the county. I can assure you that match will be very expensive. That will take our reserves down to very anemic levels. That'll have impacts if we need to do this and pay for it, where some of the cost sharings and revenue sharings that we have with some of our sister cities, our municipalities, will be impacted, and their revenue stream will be cut off for years, and probably as long as a decade. When I look at some of the financial impacts, if we had to pay out some $56 million and put the debt on the Sanibel Causeway, that debt needs to be paid back. So that's just one example of it. Community block development grants are ones that are out there and available. And if anything I've learned from Hagerty, and I can't thank Hagerty and Collaboratory enough for hosting this and the assistance through this process, they've identified the opportunities and the creativity of trying to maximize even some cities that might not necessarily realize that they have great potential. In speaking with Tanya, Panama City Beach, places up in Bay County that you wouldn't have thought maybe would have fared as well in the block grants, but they did. Also, when I was doing research over the weekend, Hurricane Sandy received over $50 billion of federal funding alone. So when I start to go through Department of Interior's, Department of Commerce, there's many opportunities for us to collaborate together as one. This is about the people's recovery. That's what this is. This is trying to help our constituents, whether you're an individual, whether you're a second homeowner, whether you're a business. We have an obligation to try to assist you. And I can't thank each and every one of you enough for trying to participate. I know it's very easy to look at yourself internally and perhaps maybe be overwhelmed with the task in front of you as you're operating, whether you're a school board, whether you're a health board, whether you're a city or a county. But there are many times where we're going to need to collaborate together as one. And I don't want to dilute your advocacy for your own individual city. That's not what I'm looking to do. But the public has a responsibility, and we have an obligation to the public for them to understand exactly what we're doing here, to be fully transparent to the public, to talk about the necessary things. That's why we're going to operate these meetings in the public. That's why there will be openness to the public. They'll be recorded as any other minute. They'll be subject to sunshine. And I think all those things are very important for us to continue to advocate for our community. And really the recovery is, when you look at it, a financial recovery that comes from all aspects. Businesses have to recover, schools have to recover, hospitals have to recover, nonprofits have to recover, and individuals. So whatever we can do collectively to try to assist as a county, as an opportunity where there's many avenues. And what we don't know is what we don't know. We have no idea the funding sources that are out there. I'm privileged to have such a great company like Hagerty to identify the different funding sources may be available. When I was looking at Department of Commerce and Department of Interior, I didn't even realize that those were avenues. I didn't even know the natural disaster framework was put together by Homeland Security until I started to do the work and start to look at the various assistance they've done. We have a long-term recovery. It's a long-term task that we all have. I think there's no better group of people that I'd rather work with than you all in this room. And you're going to advocate for your cities. But collectively, I just think, as I've looked at over the years, I look at the 07 times when I got into office and it looked really bleak, where some of the releases that seemed to be year after year after year, well, the pandemic and obviously the storm, we've recovered and we will recover. There's not a doubt about that. But collectively as a team, I think we're much better recovering. So I can't thank you all enough for participating in this. I can't thank the Board of County Commissioners for having nominated me to obviously head up this task and head up this responsibility. It's been an honor to be to Tallahassee as frequent as I have been. I'm certainly committed to, if anything I've learned from Bay County, and the commissioners came down here and spent days with us, is the avocation is often and needed very frequently. The more frequently you can go up there. Remember Jay Trumbull saying to me, you need to go up there, and honestly, when they look at you, they know exactly who you are and why you're there. A lot of us had many opportunities, and I took a lot of the delegation around, and many of you took various people, including as well as the governor, around to your community, and you had the opportunity. But as the legislature goes through this process, they're going to start to work right now. They've put this in a plan in resiliency, both in the House and the Senate. They've already awarded beach renourishment, which obviously is for all of us. There was $28 million awarded. There's been many things that have been awarded thus far that really are from a group point of view or from the county point of view. The block grants are certainly going to come out that way. And just so many other aspects that we're going to come across as we deal with each and every individual aspect. I can't imagine session being anything more than a very, very active session. But now we have two storms, which is unusual for Florida. We have two different communities, East Coast and West Coast, all advocating to try to help their communities rebound and recover. So I ask each and every one of you to try to participate as much as you can. There's a couple other things that I wanted to address in my opening comments. This group, I quickly found out that there's a member in the group that actually terms out. So I'm going to obviously come up with the concept of an alternate. Any of your cities that want to have an alternate, please feel free to do so. I think it's encouraged to do so. The alternate will be no different than an alternate at the MPO or any other entity where they'll actually fill in. They'll have to go through the same aspects of learning what they need to do. But I think that's important as we have people term out, as we have elections that take place, and or as if any of you go through the rotation of going from mayor to council person. I invited each mayor here and each chair of a particular situation. It really wasn't my way of trying to do anything other than trying to elevate each person that was in charge of their city or designated as that. It's your council, and you certainly do what's best for you. It's your community, and you talk about what you need to do. But I wanted to try to address that early because it wasn't not even out of the gate this morning where I realized that we're going to have a term out on one of our existing mayors right now in the very, very near future. So that'll cause this issue. With that, I'll just close and once again, thank each and every one of you for participating in this task force, participating in the long-term recovery for the citizens of Lee County. Everything that we need to do, we keep in mind what it is for the citizens. We are many pieces, but as one, we are a whole. And if anything, I really embraced during the recovery, during the first couple of days of search and recovery, how we all collaborated together, how every entity from the federal government all the way down worked together. And that symmetry and that collaboration was one that I thought was extremely successful in getting to where we got to and where we are today. Tomorrow it's 150 days. So I just honestly will close and say thank you once again. And with that, I'll do introductions. If we can go around the table and just introduce yourself, that would be really, really helpful.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Robert DeLallo. I'm the Fire Chief of the Lee-Acres Fire Control and Rescue District.
And as protocol for the meeting, if you could push the button on the microphone so the circle is green, that way the video can hear as well.
Good morning, Robert DeLallo. I am the Fire Chief, Lee-Acres Fire Control and Rescue District.
Good morning. My name is John Holloway. I'm the Under Sheriff for Carmine Marcino, the Sheriff here in Lee County.
Armor Persons, Chair, Lee County Schools.
Good morning, Jenna Persons-Malika, Chair of the Lee County Legislative Delegation. And thank you, Chair Ruane, and to the entire Board of County Commissioners for putting together this task force. I will echo what Chair Ruane said. It's going to be a busy session, and we're going to be fighting and competing for support, but we have the best team to do it here. And I know each and every one of you and how far you've already advocated and how hard you're advocating. And I truly appreciate that. And the more that it can be done with one voice, the more powerful. But please know that the entire legislative delegation for Lee County is committed and dedicated to fighting for what we need to recover here at home. Thank you.
Katie Arrington, Mayor of the Village of Estero.
Good morning, John Gunter, Mayor of City of Cape Coral.
Good morning, Holly Smith, Mayor of the City of Sanibel.
Good morning, Dan Allers, Mayor of Town of Fort Myers Beach.
Good morning, Matt Caldwell, Lee County Property Appraiser.
Chris Corey, Delegate from the City Council of the City of Bonita Springs.
Good morning, Dave Collins, Lee Health Board of Director.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Owen. I'm with Collaboratory, who's assisting with the coordination of the recovery.
Good morning, I'm Kevin Anderson, Mayor of the City of Fort Myers.
Terry Mazzani, work with Sarah here at Collaboratory. Pleased to work with my partner and Tanya and the team at Hagerty to be able to provide what you need to be very successful as a task force.
Hi, and I'm Tanya from Hagerty.
Terry, I'll kick it back to you.
Very good. Okay. We want to take a few minutes to make sure that everybody is grounded and the public is aware of the roles and responsibilities for the Recovery Task Force. And at Collaboratory, we have a saying that, what can we do together that we can't do individually? And I think that really summarizes the essence of this task force. As Commissioner Ruane stated, each of you are advocating and leading recovery efforts on behalf of your constituents. And in addition, there are things that we can do collectively. We are on the sprint phase of the Marathon of Recovery, and this goes through December 5th, when we would be producing the final product for the Board of County Commissioners to consider. We'll begin with initial priorities, build out the branches that are the working groups that will drive a lot of the content that we're working with. The Recovery Task Force will then receive their recommendations and ratify the documents in a comprehensive plan, recognizing that so many of the issues are entangled with each other, be it housing and workforce or infrastructure. And so this group has the big picture overview for how all of these pieces connect. There's an important part of the federal flows of funding that require community engagement, as well as in your roles as public officials, you know, the imperative of civic engagement for the work here. And so that will be an active and ongoing part of this. We have a cadence of monthly meetings to move forward. At this point, we'll be developing what that engagement strategy looks like. The branches will develop specific action plans, and Tanya will review the overall recovery timeline for the monthly reports and then the proposals coming forward for the broader plan. Prior to this meeting, you will have received an invitation to nominate members. Commissioner Ruane indicated that for the Recovery Task Force membership, the opportunity to identify an alternate will serve in your stead for that. And we want to move the meeting around. So we invite you to let us know if you would like to host one of the meetings. You've got the full schedule, and we would really learn a lot from visiting different communities that are represented around the table. So that prior email sent out starts the nomination process. I understand we already have some nominations in the queue, which is great. We're looking at, for the branches, to have 8 to 10 representatives, public, nonprofit, private sector, subject matter experts. Here's where we're really looking at your connections with subject matter experts, knowledgeable representatives in your communities who can help to inform the work of the branches. There's an easy to use form through the link to be able to upload information there. And we're seeking to get this to Commissioner Ruane in time to be able to present to the Board of County Commissioners for their meeting on March 7th. If there are more than 10 individuals nominated, then there'll be a selection based on qualifications and to make sure that there is a broad representative of the interests and expertise that will help the branch to be very successful for that. And then we will go about starting up the branch meetings following the approval from the Board of County Commissioners. So we're looking at between March 13th and March 24th for the kickoff there. The branches themselves, these are modeled after the National Disaster Recovery Framework that Commissioner Ruane mentioned from Homeland Security. The members, they'll be meeting more frequently. Their job are the tactical action plans, but also to address emergent and emergency needs that will also come to this table and then can be delegated to a branch or a ad hoc working group to address those issues. They'll be interfacing with community. And the bottom line is creating these viable, feasible, desirable, actionable plans that can move right away into helping to make a difference in our community there. And identifying funding opportunities with Hagerty's network and experience, connecting into a variety of streams of funding from the federal government. It's not just HUD, it's not just FEMA that has dollars available for this. And then anticipating that there'll be policy considerations as well that will need to be addressed, be it at the state, county, or local level, and how that gets addressed. So those are the 8 branches. Previously, Commissioner Ruane had identified leads for those and then building out the membership under those leads.
All right, so I'm going to talk about what we'll be working on together throughout the rest of the calendar year. So immediate phase, that is between now and the end of the calendar year. So December 5th, when the long-term recovery and resilience plan will be presented to the Board of County Commissioners. Prior to that, and I'll go over the timeline in just a little bit, you'll have access to the plan, providing feedback and being able to circulate it within your jurisdiction as well. With the emergent issues, so over the next several months, we're going to be identifying the unmet needs and areas that need to be addressed and identifying solutions. But between now and December, a lot is going to happen within your individual recoveries. Speaking to, it was said earlier that with one voice, it comes a lot more strength in being able to communicate to state and federal partners. So if you have an issue that you are facing in your recovery at this time that you would like to bring to the recovery task force, we'll send reminders out before every meeting, but you can send to the support team at least 3 days ahead of each recovery task force. I'd like to discuss this issue during the emergent issue session of the recovery task force meeting. What we saw in Bay County was that at one point in time, almost every jurisdiction was experiencing a certain issue in their public assistance process. And we were all kind of hitting this particular block independently. So a decision was made to put together a single letter with signatories from across the county, including municipalities, the hospitals, charter schools, school district, the county, and being able to say with one voice, this isn't just a Panama City issue. This is not just a Bay County issue. This is happening to everybody. We need assistance and we need help. And with that one voice, we were able to get meetings with FEMA headquarters, FEMA Region 4, to address the problem that we were all facing. So that's kind of the idea with the emergent issues. It may not be just with public assistance or one of the other issues that you may be experiencing and would like to bring to this forum. We just ask that you notify the support team, and we'll send out the email, the info@resiliently.org email, and let us know. I'd like to add this to the agenda, and we will have it as part of the minutes and part of the agenda for that meeting that is coming up. With the emergent issues, that will just be time-sensitive issues that either the task force wants to discuss amongst yourselves, and then you can either assign it out to the branches, you can assign it out to the support team, Collaboratory and Haggerty, or it may be an element of we need to have county municipal staff work together or brief out at the next meeting on what is being done in a certain area. So it'll be issue to issue and identifying what the solution is and next steps, but would very much appreciate if you have something you would like to bring to the agenda, letting us know and we'll add it. All right. As part of the development of the Recovery and Resiliency Plan, the first step is going to be listening. As Terry and Commissioner Ruane mentioned, a number of the federal funding streams that will be coming through will be really looking for that public engagement. And it's also just a best practice to listen to the community, have open community sessions and be able to identify what the unmet needs are, do workshops with subject matter experts. And we'll talk a little bit more later on what community engagement will look like. But the initial phase is listening. We're going to hit the ground running because with one of the funding streams that we anticipate to be announced any day now, we are on a clock the second that it's announced. That's CDBGDR. And also just having that forum with the general public and being able to get that input to identify specific issues that the task force would like to identify solutions for. So that'll be the first couple of months of the effort in doing these sessions with the public in various ways and stakeholders and other subject matter experts to gain their input. In addition of analyzing that input that is coming through those various sources, looking at your existing plans. The amount of funding coming to this area is going to be once in a generation amount of funding. So being able to utilize it strategically, utilize it creatively and innovatively to be able to address pre-existing issues that being further exacerbated. So doing that analysis of existing plans that you have, and then that general through the public engagement sessions, and identifying what are the unmet needs that the task force wants to take on. And then the final component, this is August, means right around the corner, it's around August, is identifying those solutions, being able to identify with the subject matter experts what are viable, what are actionable, and with a number of our conversations, what are steps that we can take that are achievable in short time frames so we can show that progress. Recovery is very long. Bay County is about halfway there, and we're 4 years later. So being able to show that hope that progress is being made over time with the different solutions that are identified. So here's the timeline that I just mentioned, doing the kickoffs this month through March, immediately hitting the ground with community engagement and doing that analysis with the existing plans. Going through that planning process and documenting it within the branches. Each meeting, the branches will be briefing out on what they're doing, what is their strategy for community engagement, and then what are some of the solutions that they're identifying for your consideration to include in the final recovery and resilience plan. We are going to do another round of community engagement to validate the information, the solutions, to gain public input on the solutions that are being identified. And the goal is to have the plan in a near final position by October so that you're able to provide detailed feedback and then be able to circulate it within your jurisdiction so that it is ready to present to the Board of County Commissioners on December 5th. Here's the schedule. We'll send invites for your calendars. And as we identify the locations for each meeting, you'll receive an email from info@resiliently.org asking if there are specific sessions that you would like to host within one of your facilities. And we will have those invites updated to reflect the address of the meetings. And as Commissioner Rain has mentioned, there's going to be constant ongoing advocacy. There's going to be different funding streams that pop up and ensuring that you have visibility on what those are, as the grants that are actually applied for will be done by a specific jurisdiction or in collaboration with multiple jurisdictions. But we are subject to those timelines, as a number of your jurisdictions have submitted already your hazard mitigation grant program projects to the Disaster Advisory Council, as we are subject to the May 31st deadline for those grant applications. So we want to make sure that we are meeting those requirements that the federal and state partners outlined to ensure the funding does flow to Lee County. And then additionally, being able to articulate the needs to the state and federal leaders. So midterm phase. And part of this is articulating to the public that this is a long-term, everyone wants to get back to normal quick, and that is completely understandable. This is, as you all know, is going to be a long recovery. Midterm phase is the submission of the plan at the end of December, or in the beginning of December. Based off the lessons learned from some of the largest national disasters throughout the country and Hurricane Michael, the vision, and we can modify this based off of your feedback, but the vision for the long-term recovery and resilience plan is having that vision of what is resiliency and what does you want the community to look like in the coming years. This is not necessarily a 50 years ahead. This is like the next 5 to 8 years. Like I said, Panama City is 4 years into their recovery and we're about halfway through. The plan is also going to identify how we came to the conclusion of which unmet needs the task force would like to take on. As we had a conversation with a number of you guys, there's going to be issues that are a specific issue for 1 or 2 municipalities that maybe is not for this task force, that is something that is unique to their communities. So that necessarily is not for this group to take on. But so part of that unneeds assessment is what are the issues that is impacting the entire region that will be included in this long-term recovery and resiliency plan. We're going to outline the overall process that we're taking so that we can show to federal funders that it is a collaborative effort, that it is taking the input of the whole community, but then having a very actionable, specifically looking at targets and milestones plan that are achievable throughout the process, so we can show that progress, that there are funding streams tied to it, that this is as much as possible. If we want to do this, then potentially public assistance or hazard mitigation grant program or CDBGDR or one of the other federal funding streams can cover those costs. But then also identifying, all right, this is a project that the task force is passionate about, but we have not found a funding stream yet for it. So we need to advocate to our state and federal partners in identifying funding stream or maybe an opportunity for the private sector to invest. So the end product is a very actionable, this is what the recommendation is for the entire community to take on. But then also, how does a task force want to track that progress? So plan is written, and what happens in emergency management quite frequently is that a plan is written, it goes into a pretty binder, and it goes on the shelf. We want to make sure that it's a living document, that it is something that is being updated regularly, that there are, if jurisdictions are identifying that we are going to do this, that we're able to identify how that progress is being made and show that to the community through the resiliently.org website that was launched, I believe, last night. So that'll be also a conversation with you all that how do you want to have that progress be demonstrated? And then the long-term phase is securing the grants, securing the funding, and then going out and doing. You all have been working so hard for so long since Hurricane Ian. It is quite a long more path ahead to continue in your recovery, but monitoring the steps that were taken. Are there things that need to be changed within the plan that didn't necessarily go or needed to be modified to fit a specific funding stream slightly? And then also the development of community plans. So one of the pieces that will be separate documents that are being put together are master community plans, where going into the detail, and we'll go a little bit more into it when we're talking about the planning and capacity branch. But this is something we did in Bay County for Panama City, was rethinking downtown. And these community plans are a lot more detailed, down to like, how do they want parking to flow? What are some of the businesses that would like to be recruited? That was some of the community input that we received, was that we don't necessarily need a CPA firm and other businesses that are very critical to the community, but for the liveliness of downtown, the number one request was they wanted a brewery that we got from the community. And having that having that energy in the downtown area and making it a community, as well as a farmer's market, that was number two. And having that life downtown. So with community plans, being able to identify specific areas within the community that just get that deep dive look of how to build back more resiliently and support a community that might be particularly impacted by Ian, or a lot of opportunity to come back a lot stronger. So the initial community engagement structure, it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. Terry is going to be speaking about the on-the-table sessions that are going to be the kickoff, but we are also going to be doing workshops, and this is where, in respect to your staff's time, we will be doing specific workshops for different types of stakeholders and subject matter experts, but we don't want to add to their already very full plate. So doing workshops where we can collect information and get their input while recognizing that they need to go back to their regular position. The design workshops are for the community plans and kind of doing charrettes with the community to get that input of what they're looking for, public messaging through social media apps and other means, and then just regular meetings with the recovery task force branches and other stakeholders that you would like to have engaged on a regular basis. Like I said, the resiliently.org website was launched in the last couple of days, and it is going to continue to be built out. It is currently at its initial operating capability, but we're going to be putting up the videos so there's transparency to the community of the different meetings that are occurring, the agendas, and the different initiatives that the task force has identified as we go through. And I'll kick it over to Terry.
Okay, thank you. Prior to Hurricane Ian, our region's 3 community foundations, Collier Community Foundation, Charlotte Community Foundation, and Collaboratory, had organized a day of civic dialogue scheduled for October 12th. Clearly, we postponed that, and at the time, we had identified March 30th, looked like an open date on the calendar to re-engage the community. Little did we know that this would be right in the middle of this required public engagement window. And so opportunistically, we're making available this platform for each of your communities, your stakeholders, your constituents to engage in structured community conversations around the recovery and rebuilding and other civic concerns that people may have. So each of you has a host kit, and we have other host kits here. Our lead for this, Noel Casagrande, is in the back here, is a great resource for that, and a team that we have on the ground here. In the host kit, a series of materials helping to guide what this looks like. And you'll see we, rather than reprint the materials, we just put a sticker on there to save some costs there to reorganize. But it's a simple platform online, being able to register as a host, as a participant, and have these conversations in civic spaces that would be available so that you could rally and unite community members to provide input in this very important phase of our recovery work. So that was shovel ready, and we'll utilize that to get, literally thousands of people and voices there. There's a survey that's been provided by FGCU, which includes then the anonymous sharing of information from people. And it'll be coded by zip code, though, so that we're able to break out the survey results that would be germane for your communities as well. So it's an important vehicle that is ready to go. In fact, at a baseball game today, there's a community corner conversation that's sharing this information as well with residents and visitors from the region. So that'll be an important vehicle for us to tap. All right. We're almost done with the presentation portion here, and just want to do a quick review of the branches. Each of you at your place should have a piece of paper. If you want to take some notes about ideas, we will move right from this overview of the branches into then a discussion led by Commissioner Ruane for the thoughts of the initial priorities that you would like the branches to tackle. Just wanted to go in depth about the scope of work for each of the branches. Both the unmet needs as well as community engagement, the expertise brought to bear here, solutions and innovative ideas. Very important that we keep driving innovative ideas here, so that how can we make our region, our communities, the places where we live, work, and play more resilient. I was struck early on from Commissioner Ruane's commitment to building back in a way that residents never again have to experience the type of loss and destruction that we experienced from Hurricane Ian. We will be compiling at the branch level the types of data and research that will underpin strong planning, and then understanding the policy environment and any changes that need to be made there.
So Terry is going to be going through each individual branch and some of what are the initial actions. And then after that, to these, in the notes that you're taking for the discussion afterwards, looking for input from you all to these different points of where do you want the branches' energies to be focused initially. So just kind of contemplating some of these points as he's going through the branches, and then we'll be pulling that from you all so that we can provide that information to the branches at their kickoff meetings.
The planning and capacity branch, this is going to really set the stage as if kind of a master plan, understanding those areas and communities, neighborhoods that would benefit from a more concentrated look at detailed planning that will help to energize more broadly the entire county, the entire region here. So these are about the neighborhoods with potential, gaining public input, identifying likely in the August window, as Tanya said, the types of charrettes, the planning charrettes that many of you are familiar with from your role as civic leaders, and then identifying guidelines going forward and the policies that will be required. Next, the Economic Recovery Branch, as Commissioner Ruane indicated, this is a financial recovery, and it's very important that we're working to help reestablish businesses and the goods and services that power our region. We're also looking at not only the retention and development of existing businesses, but what are the new sectors that we should be considering and developing that we would want to be focused on anyway? How do we attract investment to the region to power that growth? And how do we support a notion of local economic resilience in our work? So there's a series of next steps. Go ahead, you're fine. We're pacing just fine. The education workforce, here the good news is that pre-existing is Future Makers Coalition. And it has the ability, it is already focused on access to higher education. It is already focused on its goal of 55% of post-secondary credentials for the region to make us resilient. It already has received that $23 million grant from EDA in partnership with FGCU. So there's a lot going here. And it's an opportunity, as so much in the plan, as what more could we be doing with the additional resources available here? So we'll be building off of that platform to drive the work. For health and human services, here we understand how hard hit our health systems were. And I think it's really identified key resilient measures that have to be taken. It's an example, I know, that David here is working on plans for Lee Health and what each of the facilities needs to be able to withstand a similar disaster in the future. Good example. How do we fold that into a larger framework so that not only is the Recovery Task Force supporting what Lee Health facilities need to be able to withstand a strong hurricane, but what do we need as standards adopted across the entire region? So it's one of the important works. This also includes support for the nonprofit sector. So much of our recovery and the initial response was based upon what the nonprofit organizations were able to do to step up immediately to deploy massive amounts of resources. You know, our partners like United Way and the work that they've done, Catholic Charities, Red Cross, Habitat, the list goes on and on. How do we make sure that they are strong and resilient and able to step up in times of need? The infrastructure branch, this is for those who have an engineering mindset and also who bring a lot of imagination to this. We're looking at our water systems, the treatment facilities, the grid, transportation, broadband. All of us know how important, how essential the iPhone is, our communications and the backbone. So what did we learn from what capacity was lost? What held together? How do we strengthen those systems so that we have uninterrupted service and connectivity in the face of a disaster? And then housing is a classic example. Housing was described as a crisis before the hurricane. It's only more so now. And so does this create a once in a generation commitment of an infusion of funding and political will to be able to identify creative solutions that especially bring back the attainable housing that so many of our communities need to be able to house the workforce that powers our economy, that powers the amenities and the services that we all depend on day in and day out, and doesn't exacerbate the transportation issues and challenges that we have here. So there, housing is linked to transportation, is linked to infrastructure, is linked to economic recovery, is linked to education and workforce. Natural resources, we know that so much of Lee County and the asset here is all about the natural resources and how do we protect, preserve, conserve, rehabilitate, restore those resources. It touches all of us. It's a point of pride for this community, offering amenities unlike any other place on the planet. And then finally, the cultural resources branch. We know that there are important iconic cultural institutions, places, buildings, sites, and how do we protect these? How do we engage the arts community in infusing creativity into the rebuilding process and engage our artists and creative thinkers in the actions that would inform the imagination of each of the branches as we go forward. So with that, let me turn it back to Commissioner Wayne.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Tanya. Now I'll open up the discussion from Recovery Task Force members.
Quick,
Yes, ma'am.
raise my hand. What's point of order here? Just what you're looking for right now. Are you looking, received the email that we have until March 2nd to provide names. I understand there's already a running list. Is that something that's be provided? We don't want to double up. Is that what you're looking for right now? Or are we looking for further discussion under each item just for some clarity on any additional? Because I think it's very comprehensive what you just reviewed for us.
Good. Yeah, this is your opportunity to share your thoughts about either questions in general, things that were unclear from what Tanya and I just presented, or Commissioner Ruane's opening framing of this, or to go more specific into thoughts about the branches and what you would like to see as a point of focus for their work.
Okay,
But
just
to answer your other question, we can certainly send you a list of people who have sent bios and what we've received thus far. And it's come in through the weekend, so things have changed momentarily.
right. I know they have. And that would be helpful
Sure.
because I don't know if you have the full list, and I don't think that we're going to be meeting again before it's passed on to the board for approval. So just being able to look that over and then provide additional input if there are some names on there that we could possibly help with. I think the clarity on this for each of those discussion items is fantastic. I think it's very clear on the direction on each item.
We'll make sure the list goes out today, as well as giving you a little detail of each branch, what we initially see their focus to be. And again, I think the clarity on this is it's what we don't know and what we'll continue to do. I've been amazed as we have dealt with issues that we never thought of. Construction debris being picked up at 100%, never going on private properties. We have changed so many different aspects. I never thought I'd be going up to the legislator and asking to match our 20% and actually being it received. Never thought I'd have the conversations about what a disaster loss looks like and what it needs to be, or SBA. But it seems like our ask or what we ask and what we continue to define, we'll understand. But financially, I can tell you that each one of us, including the county, this has taken every financial resource we have. And if you play worst case scenario, we have a lot of work to do in front of us to make sure we recover, because the numbers that we've been presented with as county commission are staggering, from natural resources to DOT to any type of utility connections and reconnections. Simple stoplights and street signs are in the tens of millions of dollars. Again, resources that you couldn't imagine. So it's us brainstorming, and I recognize everybody is individual and you have specific needs to your specific community. But I think how we separate the two, have the city be engaged in this and identify the challenges, because we all need to survive. The simplest way to look at this is when we send a tax bill out, each one of us have a line on a tax bill. So whether you're from Sanibel or Fort Myers Beach, each recovery task force member is part of that situation, whether it's the fire, whether it's the sheriff's office. So let's just talk out loud as we can and come across things, because what was not necessarily a procedure followed in the past or a funding vehicle in the past, we've already broken those barriers, and we've been able to identify and tell our elected officials just what's our needs.
If I may just add, just step back before I go to this, because I think, Tanya, when we were speaking, and Terry, when I talked to you in regards to Sunshine, as you've indicated, we all are our own municipalities. Here, we're under Sunshine in a different way. So it would be my thought, Kevin, you and I, I head to Tallahassee as well to advocate. I know that we all do here. Are we going to be restricted? Can you and I walk into a place together? Could Dan and I walk into a place together and advocate for our needs? Or would we be falling under Sunshine? Because basically we're talking about Ian recovery, which is what we're all dealing with and will be for a long time. Want to make sure we're not restricted to be able to do that and work together, but still work under Sunshine as required.
Great question. And I'll certainly let Richard, but when you and I worked for the city of Sanibel, both you, I, and Mick many times went into legislators. So there was three of us, same issues of Sunshine. So we had to work around those particular issues. In that regard, we have gone up to the federal government and operated on the FAST. We've advocated back when we were mayors, we all testified before Congress. So there's an opportunity for us. I think the challenge will be, obviously the question is, elected official on the other side of the table going to ask yourself and or myself, what do we think? That type of dialogue. I think clarity for Sunshine would be helpful. Richard, I know you're here someplace. Could you, just a little bit further clarity, but I understand your point of view, Mayor Smith, and certainly you and I have worked together in that vein. I don't believe we ever even came close to violating Sunshine. And then we did walk into many elected officials together, not only here in the state, but we did it in Washington many times.
And we will be doing that again. I think it's an important conversation for us to all have and understand what that means.
Richard?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Richard Wesch. I am the Lee County Attorney, and I've been asked, excuse me, one of the things the chairman was happy to share with me was his recent cold. So I apologize for that.
Richard, if it's any consolation, I still have it.
Misery loves company, Mr. Chairman. Just real briefly, if I could, Sunshine Law, quick primer, everybody understands it, everybody's bound by it. Two or more members of the same board or commission talking about an item that is or is likely to come before that commission. In this case, the board is this board. So my caution to each of you would be, obviously, if there is a matter which is known or reasonably foreseeable to come before this body, you in your advisory role or your task force position here should avoid those conversations with one another. As with all Sunshine Law inquiries, they're specifically fact-driven. So if there's a specific inquiry based on a set of facts, feel free to reach out to either my office on behalf of the task force, or if it involves your role, Mayor, with another mayor, I would suggest you contact your city attorney as well. He and I have spoken as late as Thursday, and we share a lot of these same thoughts with regard to the applicability of the Sunshine Act as it applies to this task force. So, again, typically with newly elected officials, I get asked the question, does that mean I have to give up friendships? And obviously, everybody gathered around this table knows the Sunshine Law does not require that. Sunshine Law requires an item that is or is reasonably foreseeable to come before this board for action. Should be avoided out of the duly noticed public hearing concept. One of the other questions that has come to light or run through my mind is if some of you appoint an alternate, can the sitting member and the alternate have a conversation? And the Attorney General has opined that yes, they can, because in that context, you have one body, you have one seat at this table. So conversations between you as a task force member and your task force alternate member are within the bounds of the sunshine. You do not violate it. However, that has to be analyzed both in terms of your task force participation and your role as perhaps a city council person. And with that, again, I would direct your attention to your respective city attorney, because a matter which might arise here, which is the subject of discussion between the appointed member and their alternate, might likewise come up in your role as a city council person and mayor. So while you might not have a task force sunshine law issue, you might have a municipal issue. And again, with all sunshine law inquiries, they're specifically fact driven.
And thank you for that. It's kind of clear as much as we can make it clear. And when I look at what we are potentially doing and I look at the overlying structure of this, basically, this is what we are all dealing with every day as we're rebuilding our respective locations, especially I can say with Fort Myers Beach and the city of Sanibel at a much different level. So that's helpful. And we'll have to take that back to my city attorney also with our council to see, who. I don't want to have restrictions of being able to go anywhere with Kevin or Dan or any other members here and being restrictive in what I can say, advocating for what we know is going to be this long-term recovery. So thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, one final comment.
Sure.
And again, just to reiterate, any way myself or my office can assist the task force, that we're perfectly willing to do that. With regard to your role in your specific municipalities, I would urge you to contact your municipal attorney to address those questions.
Thank you,
Just
Richard.
follow up, if I will. Richard, you're aware, and I made reference before, the mayor and myself working together, obviously not only in the state, but the federal government, collaborating, working together and making sure we do it. You're aware that both myself and the chairman went up to Tallahassee in December together and collectively went around to many different legislators. And obviously we advised you, and you certainly gave us caution on what and what not to do, but we were still able to do so. I did report back to you what we went on, what we did. You're very comfortable with that. So I do believe there's a forum that we can certainly follow. I think the only thing we need to do is recognize that there comes a point in time where if there's a decision that this task force is going to make, that might be your issue. Is that fair?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And again, the test for sunshine law analysis is an item that is or is likely to come before this task force for official action. All that such action should take place in the duly noticed public meeting, such as we're gathered here today.
Correct. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, question.
I thought I was going to get away.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to clarify my own position, I guess, as a representative of the City of Bonita Springs City Council. So the fact that I was selected to be on this task force, what's my level of authority in terms of functioning in this body? Is, for example, if everything we discuss and anything that I raise my hand for, does that have to be in effect cleared by my city council before I can say anything? Or as a task force member, can I offer my own opinion and thoughts with respect to a specific issue. In other words, how much freedom do I have to function as a task force member?
I'll initially take the first crack and then I'll go to my county attorney. Chris, I don't view this any differently than an MPO or a TDC type role. The fact that we've done this under some unusual circumstances is to allow your city, and what I'm asking also in the alternate phase, that you go back to your city, indicate that your city does want representation here. You have that opportunity to have an alternate. So we have coverage here to do so. But I don't view this, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is any different than an MPO or TDC type of meeting that you represent your city or your county.
Mr. Chairman, no, sir, I would fully concur in your comments. I would suggest that any limitations on any individual's participation at the task force would be placed by their respective jurisdictions and not by the task force.
Other questions? Yes.
Well, first off, I would like to offer our schools, subject to availability, for any community meetings or planning sessions. Because we certainly are spread out through the whole county in some places. If you, depending how far you want to go, that would be good. My question was basically on the hurricane shelters we have for long-term and things. I wasn't sure which committee that would fall under. Would it be resiliency or would it be more under education? That was one of my questions.
For in terms of the shelter and the actual building itself and the resiliency of said buildings, I would say that'd be under the infrastructure. Branches are a particular area that you would like them to focus on?
No, it just, we bear the brunt of all the shelters after a hurricane. So I think that needs to be addressed a little bit more. And then also the final place when the schools are back in session, there are no other shelters. I think needs to be addressed a little bit more.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the infrastructure aspect is really crucial and important. I think the collaboration that we need to obviously have is more essential, and we didn't really understand the collaboration that was necessary as the storm was coming. And maybe in the future, if anything we learned is obviously collaborating earlier, trying to put a plan together, identifying what particular structures are best, and coordinating those efforts. You're right. We did rely on the schools as our shelters. So the fact that we need to learn from this, have it put in a plan, and certainly identified what are our next steps when hurricane season comes, because believe it or not, it's only a couple months away. So I think that's an important ingredient. And I think there was a certain things that we'll identify quickly that has a quicker time frame. So I think to your point, Armor, I would definitely want to make sure we have the coordination efforts. What do we do? Next steps, which shelters are available? And then from there, obviously anything we need to address those particular shelters, let's try to do that.
If I could add on to that, I think another area is looking at elder care, the nursing homes, where evacuation would go.
Infrastructure, health and human services.
And that would be my question for the task force. We had many nursing homes that ended up sheltering in place or last minute evacuation. So I think that's a big component of what we need to be looking at.
That I agree with you 100%, plus special needs.
Right,
Go
absolutely.
one step further.
Mhm.
We certainly identified just the special needs group that was here, and we certainly need to do a much better job at trying to make sure we're able to provide them resources and hospitality that addresses their special needs.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think one of the other things that we have to look at, when you take a look at these different branches, I'm sure all of us are going to recommend professionals that are within this field. And I think it's going to be extremely important for these particular branches to identify what their priorities are, because we're going to be relying on their expertise. So we want to get that feedback. So I think early on in the process, one of their first meetings, they need to develop what the priorities are within their particular branch and bring that back to this board so we can review what their priorities are. And then if there are other priorities that this board feels that they should look at as well, then we can make that recommendation. But I feel in the very beginning in their discussions, they need to identify what's important, what priorities that they want to look at within their branch, and bring that back to this board as early as possible so we can review it and make our recommendations or any directions back to that particular branch. So I think that's one of should be with their first task.
Thank you. Other questions?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
The planning and capacity one, I think specifically for our area, and I'm guessing other municipalities where you share resources side by side, parks, parking, the pier in our case. I think a focus for that group is a pretty high priority as how the county and the municipalities work together with adjoining properties. The faster we can get some input on a long-term vision from the county as well as other people in other municipalities would be very beneficial, at least for, the town of Fort Myers Beach. But I got to believe that the other municipalities have some of the same issues with the parks as we discussed on Friday. A lag from FEMA to help us get those open. So I think that's a very important one to head off at the beginning.
I agree, Mayor. We had a great roundtable conversation on Friday with the Lieutenant Governor, and what's very apparent is how we all advocate together is the inspection process that we go through from FEMA, and the need to obviously have that expedited. So whatever resources we can do to do that, because that's just another amenity. I think as we go through and identify the different areas within the branch, we'll identify things that have a higher priority. We'll prioritize those and ask the branches to do that as well. And again, this board could have that discussion, because I do agree, and I think we all had some common input with Lieutenant Governor, how essential the parks and beaches are and what we need to do. And the impediment, at least that we're been made aware of, is certainly FEMA not having enough bandwidth to be able to inspect those parks and or make the necessary recommendations on what's needed within those. So, the good news is as we collaborate, no different than day 2 of the storm, we'd have conversations 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day with different people about it. We identify the issues, and I think the more sensitive the issue and or timeline, and if it has a component that not only has an economic aspect, but it also has a mental aspect where it gives some sense of relief and some hope, those are things I look at parks to be essential to this community and beaches.
Well, if we're just throwing things out there, so obviously first, as property appraiser, certainly glad to continue to assist in understanding what the long-term fiscal impact is going to be, the tax base, what our revenue picture for the county and the cities and the districts, et cetera, in 2023 and 24 is likely to turn out to be, so we can be informed in our requests to try to get some assistance either from Tallahassee or from the federal government. But just my familiarity with the community, I've got several items, I think, and I'll let you decide how to whiteboard them. The first one I think about is, do we as a larger community seriously want to see the fishing industry be a long-term feature of our economic picture? We all saw the entire shrimp fleet stacked up on top of each other on San Carlos Island. And the reality is that land is more valuable as development. That's what's going to happen. That's what will evolve unless we make a decision to provide some kind of, whether it's a county-owned port for shorthand, that gives those small business people the opportunity to still have a place to keep their docks, keep their boats, and be in business. Absent county action or regional action, that's just going to disappear. The economics are just too strong on that question. You think about the areas hardest hit. Obviously, you've got municipalities that are focused on specific recovery right here, 3 in a row. But the unincorporated area of Iona and Harlem Heights combined, all that west of Deep Lagoon and Calhoun Marsh, that needs all of this. It needs a plan just for that geographic triangle that hits every one of the 8 pieces that are up on that board. And similarly, Pine Island obviously had some real constraints, and long-term planning has already been there in as much as the county has restricted development based on the evacuation constrictions, and then the bridge itself was gone, so it didn't matter what the flow was. You were completely cut off at that point. And so I think similarly, although maybe less intensely, because there's been work done in that community long-term. Yep.
That list you provided me really early was broken down into different subsections as you identified. It enabled me as a county commissioner to identify the 550,000 parcels and how many were impacted, but it gave us an indication. Have you updated that? And if you have, I'd love to recirculate. If you haven't, I'll recirculate it. Matt Caldwell provided me as county commissioner, just trying to look at the global impact of the areas broken down and the damage that was done to a particular parcel. And a parcel is identified as a convenience store, a residential, a condominium, a trailer park. And that's the way they identify all the issues. So if you do have said list, I'll make sure it gets distributed. I think that was quite insightful for me, at least, to identify the areas. Because as much as we talk about particular areas, I think people are always very surprised when I said, well, you should go look in my neighborhood in Southwest Cape, just how badly it was impacted. They're like, I didn't know there was any damage there. So those things I think are very, very germane. And I think this group would find it fascinating.
And we are glad to give you the real time. So the first pass with simply taking our anecdotal understanding, communicating with everybody here and in the larger group of where the storm clearly had to have had an impact, particularly the flood extent. And so drawing a geographic lasso essentially up and down either side of the river, all of the islands and all of the lower reaches down through Estero Bay, et cetera, just to identify, put our arms around what's the potential total number of properties that we'll have to evaluate. And that's where you got the number that you've heard me use before, 100,000 roughly properties that we have to evaluate. And there's a wide delta when I give you that number between total destruction to as little as, really just need to put a palm tree back up probably. But nonetheless, all that need to be evaluated, we're going through that. That we're working through the submissions from the property owners for their tax relief opportunity. That's one phase. And the second phase is our public service, our field staff interactions now going out neighborhood by neighborhood and evaluating and basically ground truthing what it is we've been able to observe through the aerials. And so I will say, so that the initial reports, the collaboration from all the communities, from the county, from FEMA, from the fire districts, and the immediate aftermath had total destruction somewhere between 10 and 15,000 parcels. I think we've been able to satisfactorily ground truth as of right now about 6,000 or 7,000 that's going to show up. We've already decided in this year's coming tax roll. And those are the priorities right now to get those identified and then move beyond that. As that becomes available, we'll certainly be glad to share that with everybody.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments? Yes, Chris.
One of the things that I struggle with as a person on city council, and I think my fellow council people also struggle with, is the request by people in our community as to how do you deal with your flood insurance claim? How do you deal with the SBA? How am I going to deal with my tax return when it comes to Ian casualty losses? And I find I can't deduct anything over 10% of my adjusted gross income, so forth. So what I do is I find myself dealing with our own community development office on permitting. raising questions as to why permits haven't been issued, trying to help people understand the SBA process, trying to get people to understand what their tax situation is. I'm a CPA. But those are the kinds of issues that I think people sit around the kitchen table in the evening and they talk about because that impacts them directly. And I think we as people on city councils and as elected representatives need to somehow focus on the individual needs as well as the overall, what I call global needs of our community and our region. So one of the things that I would like to see the branches address is how do we help our citizens resolve their flood insurance claims? How do we help them get the loans from the SBA that they need to recover their businesses or start new businesses and so forth? How do we get them the right tax information? I will tell you that I do my own tax return on TurboTax, and TurboTax will let me file claiming that Ian is a qualified financial disaster that I can deduct all my losses on. When that goes in, if I filed it that way, I'm going to get a rejection letter. And the last thing people need is a rejection letter of their tax return by the IRS on top of their problems in terms of hurricane recovery. So how do we deal with the problems that mom and pop are facing around the kitchen table at night? And I would suggest that we seriously think about how we address that in terms of one of these branches or a new branch. I know I was talking to Tanya on Friday and saying, what's the deal with FEMA? Well, you know, her experience up in Panama City and Mexico Beach and so forth is they are continually understaffed. And that's why things take so long. And so I would just encourage us to get this down to a granular level of, you know, how do I help Mr. and Mrs. Jones on South Main Street get their home back in shape, get their business back in shape, and so forth.
Chris, great point. You know, I view every question you ask under economic recovery, and within the branch, there'll be sub branches that I believe exist. You certainly have watched the community, and we have a pedigree of people that I think are amazing, volunteer and help with preparing tax returns, volunteer and helping with people with insurance. But insurance may be an issue we're all going to have to think about, maybe asking a legislator to look at a reinsurance special session to try to deal with this. You know, having come from the League of Cities and having chaired the insurance trust, reinsurance is how they offered insurance to all the municipalities within that wanted to participate in the state. So I think within that, there's sub branches that were utilized up in Bay County that certainly came together, and resources that are available to try to expedite those. We also will identify things just like you had indicated where, you know, we need a strong advocacy, and maybe we pen a letter as a group, as a task force about how important it is for that deduction on your tax return, or what federal flood insurance looks like. I was part of a group back in 2014 that went up and, you know, dealt with the federal government on Bigot Waters back in 2014. So I do believe there'll be sub branches underneath the actual branch and identify those. This community is always wanting to help. I think everyone has been asking the same question: how do I participate? How do I help? And I think they'll do so. Yes, sir.
And Councilman, the example that you shared is a great reason why we've organized On the Table. It's exactly those mealtime conversations that people share what their greatest needs or issues or concerns are, what's keeping them up at night. So I encourage using this vehicle to help to elevate the voices of the everyday residents of our community. All of that can be captured through those anonymous surveys, but it will make the point of where are people's trending topics, where are their priorities, that then this group can mobilize around to do the joint letters and other advocacy on their behalf.
Yes.
I just want to put a big emphasis on housing, workforce housing. We have many teachers that were displaced and are still displaced. And every year we have a turnover of teachers like they do all over the state. And to try to recruit teachers to come down here when there's no housing, or the housing is, an hour and a half away from a school that would hire them, makes it very difficult. And I'm sure that's same for every municipality and every construction industry or any industry. So I think we need to really emphasize that tremendously.
I agree. Other questions, thoughts, comments? A lot to digest. Recognize that there'll be other opportunities. Feel free to collaborate both with Terry and Tanya as things come up. These are evolving situations, and I imagine we're going to come across situations that'll probably have some great urgency before we actually get together again. I think you hit a point, Armor, that obviously the Senate President has made it her #1 priority for housing. So let's see how we collaborate together. There'll be many issues that'll come up, but I couldn't agree with you more. If there's no other questions,
I just,
sure,
Chair.
sorry.
No, not a question, just a comment. Was just going to say our action items that you're looking for from us.
Okay. So great question. So what I'd like to do is each and every one of you, the branches that are in front of you, will make sure that you have a description of their objectives. If there's any people that you would like to appoint, I'll make sure you have all the appropriate applications as far as that. Different issues underneath the branch that you might actually see within your particular municipality. Things that you think that we can collaborate together on. We identified some around a roundtable on Friday. We've talked about others. But as we have this task force together, what does it look like by maybe advocating for a particular letter for flood insurance, or whether you want to, think about, having an opportunity to send that letter in for a tax deduction, or whatever we can do. I think look at the branches, identify the people you can, think of issues within your particular municipality. If there's a particular issue that you might have, maybe it does fit to this, maybe it doesn't. I think I have the benefit of having Tanya and Terry here to look at funding sources that might have the opportunity to go and talk to them, because that's really what we're looking for. But if those could be the next action items that you deliver, that'd be great. And if you can coordinate them through Tanya and Terry, just send it that way. I'll make sure I disperse my information that way, send them out to you, as well as the updated list from Matt, as well as the candidates that have, submitted their bios. And I'll make sure you not only have their name, but their bios as well.
So you'll receive an email from us through the info@resiliently.org email address, where we'll ask you to confirm the primary and alternate member for the Recovery Task Force. You all have the link for the nomination, so please submit those by Thursday COB. And at your direction, we will have those who have been nominated thus far. We received several emails over the weekend. We really appreciate those who have nominated individuals thus far. Also identifying SMEs within your jurisdictions to participate in the listening workshops, and then signing up to host a Recovery Task Force meeting. So an email will send out with all those different points.
And you may want to check your spam or junk folder for the first time you get this email, as sometimes if you've had the experience, these types of emails are not always recognized by your computer initially.
We'll make this slide deck available on the website, and we'll also send it to you all via a PDF.
So I think a number of the issues that you've raised really go to the heart of the ability to gain broad-based public comment, input, perspectives from the residents here. And the notion that was shared about, is it a down palm tree, or is it a complete total devastation of a house or a business? And it runs, the more that we can understand the intimacy of these issues. And so just a reminder for you to take with you the host kits for on the table. We have additional ones if you want to take them on the way out for for cities and other entities, it's a great opportunity if you've got a communications director or if you have a community outreach officer or some individuals who can really grab a hold of this and do the organizing. Really appreciate Chairman Person's offer for schools are a fabulous facility. They're right in our communities. People know and regard them as a place for meeting and coming together. So we've got those Collaboratory itself, which also served as a staging area for the emergency responders. This room was stacked with cots for about 2 or 3 weeks following that. But we will also be hosting here. It's nicely positioned in the community. We invite restaurants to be able to host, set aside a place for these community conversations as well. The more voices that we can get, the more we're able to kind of demonstrate for the funding that is required for us to be successfully rebuilding. And for that, more information, there is a website on that that makes it easy to operate.
We'll open up to any public comment. Raise your hand if you'd like to come on up. Someone have a mic.
Good afternoon, Task Force. Thank you very much for being here and doing the work that you're doing for all of our communities. I want to second Mr. Person's recommendation that housing be on the forefront. It was a crisis before this event, and it is a state of emergency now. We cannot have school teachers living in cars and taking care of their families in their car. And this is happening. So I hope that the housing can be viewed upon in economic recovery, in healthcare, in education, because it affects all of those things. Sarah shared with me this morning, housing is where jobs go to rest at night. It's true. We need housing to have a workforce. We need housing to have economic growth. Restaurants can't serve customers if they don't have employees. So we do need to keep housing at the forefront of all of this, as well as making efficiencies within the system. The interjurisdictional issues that we have in building housing, in getting permits, in inspections, in uptake of housing vouchers, to make it good for the tenants and the landlords likewise. So thank you for what you're doing and what you will bring to this body. Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry, Sean Williams.
Any other public comments? No public comments. Okay, I'll close public comment then. We will certainly send out an email identifying the different topics we talked about, different issues. You'll continue to have updates. I appreciate everyone's time this morning. It was essential that we kick this off as we start to deal with the issues. Let's continue to collaborate through both Tanya and Terry as we identify issues that become front and center. We'll see them. They'll hit us pretty quickly. This is a long-term recovery. I am very confident that together we'll do the best we can for this community and we will recover. So thank you all for participating today. With that, I'll call for a meeting to be adjourned.